Thanks so much for joining our funding calendar cohort session. We didn't really get to spend a lot of time on this activity during the retreat, so we are hoping to make up for that during this call. Let's see here. We're going to be going over some funding considerations first, and then taking a look at the FEMA grants. Oops. And then there's a lot of new technical assistance resources coming out that we're hoping to make everyone aware of. Megan will be going over some of the housing grants. We'll also touch on BIA youth engagement grants, because that was, people were interested in youth engagement. We'll be touching on the Inflation Reduction Act grants. There's the Indian Collective, which is a non-federal, non-state agency, has a self-determination grant that has just opened up. And then we'll end with some aquatic habitat restoration grants. That was another request, after moving buildings and infrastructures, restoring aquatic habitats. So. Yeah, so I think Elisa went over a number of these during the proposal writing session, but also just wanted to repeat some of these. A good question to ask is, do the grants align with your community's priorities? You can take a look at the eligibility requirements. You can see how much funding is available. Is it worth the effort to apply for the grant? Another question that might be good to ask are certain plans required to be in place in order, in particular, to receive implementation funding? And, this could be, for example, I'm sure, I think we've said this on a number of different calls, but hazard mitigation plans are required to receive the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities implementation grants. I think that there's certain, it doesn't have to be a BIA plan, but some kind of plan needs to be in place to receive the tribal climate resilience implementation funding. And for example, if you want to use your EPA tribal environmental plan funds for a particular item, that needs to be in the works. So just thinking about things like that. Thinking about whether there are cost shares, and if so, how much. You might want to think, is this an annual awards program or is it a one-time program? And before you put a lot of work in, we really encourage you to contact the grant officers to find out if your project idea aligns with their funding priorities. And we do realize that sometimes this can be frustrating if you're not getting a response. So we really encourage you to reach out to us on the planning team. Between the BIA Tribal Climate, the branch of Tribal Climate Resilience, the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network, and ITEP, we have a really vast network, and we also have some awesome colleagues at the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. So, please feel free to reach out to us if you're not getting an answer, and we can reach out to our network to try and get some answers to your questions. And then I just wanted to pause there and see if anyone else had anything they'd like to share on, what to think about as we apply for funds and different funding strategies. Please feel free to put something in the chat or to unmute. So let's see here. I'm gonna try and share my screen and go back and forth between the website. Let's see if I can share the entire, okay. So one thing we wanted to start off with is we have this funding and technical resources page on the cohort website. And yeah, Kelsey, would you mind putting, or let me see if I can put the link.
Yeah, I can do it.
You can do it. Okay, thank you. In the chat. So we just, I guess we first off wanted to start off by letting you know that we are trying to put the latest funding opportunities, that in particular ones that are relevant to the cohort at the top of the page. So we'll both email these out. You may notice that we mentioned funding opportunities and technical resource opportunities in the emails, but we'll also try and put the latest ones at the top of the page. And we're going to be coming back to a few of these. Again, we have that resource booklet. And Twyla, I'm excited to see you on the call that Twyla and others on the call worked on. And we're going to actually be going through some of these a little bit more in more depth. And also just a really fabulous resource, we can't say enough good things about it, is the Pacific Northwest Tribal, the University of Oregon Tribal Climate Change Guide. They do, Kathy Lynn in particular and her team do an awesome job of keeping this up to date. So, oh, how did it went back to, yeah, and this is the Gantt chart. We've also added some stuff based on information provided during the retreat about, these are some newsletters and network calls that you can join. And then again, these are particular information on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. We also wanted to emphasize there are a number of organizations that can help you with your grant writing. So we have those listed here and with links. And Cynthia Toop with Shoalwater Bay, Cynthia, I hope I said your last name right, provided this example grant application request form to get tribal leadership approval for grants. So that's a resource. And then we just some other resources, and we'll be coming back to this technical assistance. So now we're going to shift to some FEMA resources. And so FEMA has put out this, yeah, FEMA's put out some this climate resources for climate resilience guide that might be helpful. And we wanted in particular to point out this chart. I'm going to scroll for a second, so I hope I don't blind people. Oh yes, here it is. So they, well, first off, as a guide to this book, they describe different grant opportunities in terms of risk assessment, mitigation planning, mitigation implementation funding, and building community capacity. And just the one thing that we really wanted to point out in this booklet was this chart. Can people see this? Let me try and make it a little bigger. So these are different programs within FEMA. We know that FEMA can sometimes seem, well, to me, it seems really complicated. So this matrix, we really like this matrix because it helps break things down, but this is the program. If it has a checkbox, it kind of says, is it for flooding, fire, or all hazards? It also notes whether it's, this is an annual grant or program cycle, so it happens every year, or whether it kind of comes into gear after a disaster happens. And then these are the different grant types, like this is for planning, for implementation, for capacity building. And they also note whether direct technical assistance is available. So this is non-financial technical assistance. So we just wanted to point this out as a resource for maybe navigating some of the FEMA grants. And then let me go here, back to the presentation. We really wanted to talk a little bit more about the FEMA BRIC non-financial direct technical assistance. FEMA has indicated that they would like to increase the funding for this. And if you remember back to the emergency management sessions at the start of the cohort, Jesse Johnson with the FEMA BRIC program touched on this, but we wanted to do a little bit more in-depth look. So the point of the direct technical assistance is to provide full support to communities. They may not have their own resources to, to engage in climate resilience planning and project solutions. They can provide support for up to 3 years. And two important things: you don't need to have a hazard mitigation plan to apply for the support, but you can have one if you do have one. And you don't need to have a previous Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grant sub-application or award.
Hey, Karen, there's a hand up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that because I can't really see. Twyla, yes. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Twyla, if I missed you.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to comment on the grid that you had up privy to this page you have up now. Was there some wordage as to how to navigate and utilize the grid that you have?
Yeah, let me see. Can we get out of this? Yeah. So if can you see the?
Oh, I see it now. Yeah.
Yeah, if you this kind of section talks about how the FEMA resources are organized, and then it talks about kind of this community resilience cycle and how, and then there's this stuff on the matrix there, that grid. Is this what you're kind of thinking of?
Yeah. I was trying to find a way to access, but I'm using my phone at the moment, so that's perfect. I just wanted to make sure there was like some kind of navigational tool to best utilize that grid that you have, because the grid is so nice.
Yeah, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And I'll put the direct link to the guide in the chat. So
Sweet.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, and actually this is a good reminder to pause. Are there any other questions before moving on? Or comments or thoughts?
I have a quick one. This is Coral. Back to the slideshow, I saw Paula Band mentioned, but I didn't catch the resource that was listed with them. Was that the video series that they put together?
Oh,
Or was that another resource? I see. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I don't think Paula Band is in here, but I'm wondering if you might have been thinking.
I meant Palma. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll mention that again, but thank you, Coral, and I'll pause there. Yeah, any other questions or comments? And Dora, I see in the chat you have what is a PIDP? Does anyone, Dora, I realize you're having connectivity. But yeah, we'll follow up on that. Oh, okay, has to do with barge landing. Thank you. Yeah, and as we go through this, no, I don't think, yeah, Dora, I think you're in line because that's a big issue for a lot of people. So thank you for mentioning that. So do you have questions on the guide? Is that what you're saying? And yeah, I can also try and follow up with you after the call. Oh, wow. Okay. So Dora, you have experience. That's great. So, thank you. But going back to the direct technical assistance. So the opportunity was a part of the BRIC Notice of Funding Opportunity Cycle, and we'll keep you up to date as we learn when the opportunity opens again. And So just to let you know, 20 communities were selected for direct technical assistance for fiscal year 2021. And these are some examples of the kinds of tribal projects or tribes who received direct technical assistance. So the Northern Cheyenne tribe received or is probably currently receiving assistance to build their grant management capacity, and also to develop a hazard mitigation plan, and then to engage stakeholders and identify mitigation projects. The Palma Band of Luiseno Indians in California has received a direct technical assistance to update their plan. And I thought this was interesting. They're also getting some assistance developing an economic resilience planning process. And I feel like I'm going to mess up this name, native village of Ozinki. If someone wants to correct me. Received help and assistance to conceptualize a tsunami evacuation tower. And then the Kimouna Bay Indian community. I know in particular, some of the Pacific Northwest tribes were interested in stormwater infrastructure. That was some of the input we got on the retreat evaluation forms. So they're receiving some direct technical assistance to look into green infrastructure design criteria that meets multiple goals that include cultural preservation and protection of critical infrastructure and ecosystems. And then the Chippewa Cree tribe is receiving assistance to conceptualize a microgrid, a solar array microgrid. So, so these are just some of the examples of the kinds of projects that you can ask for direct technical assistance for. And this is what they put on their website: local hazard mitigation plan development and initial support, identifying solutions for specific hazards. We talked about the planning. You can also request application development support, and demonstrating cost effectiveness is another thing you can ask for. And then understanding hazard mitigation grant management is another thing. So I'm gonna pause there. And yeah, Coral, thank you. Yeah, thanks for so do you want to talk about this just briefly, Coral, or is that okay? Not to put you on the spot.
I mean, I won't say much more than I put in the chat, but the Paula Band, not Palma, as we saw earlier, has put together an 8-part video training series that they've shared on the Tribal Climate Health Project's website. They partnered with EPA and some other groups to put together this training series. So it's self-paced and it's on climate change exposures and adaptation best practices. So this might be more on the beginning end than many of our RMP cohort members, but of course this could help with training new staff, or this training could be shared for other partners to the efforts that folks are undergoing. So I found it useful. They mentioned some great resources for funding opportunities and other considerations, and they use other tribal case studies as examples as well.
Oh, wow, that's fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thanks so much for mentioning this. And I'm excited that you mentioned this, Coral, because this is another thing that we hope as we have these calls and conversations, is if there are good resources that of, that's great. We can share them with cohort members and also add them to the website. So we kind of hope this is a collective effort, if you will. So thank you, Coral. And then let's see here. Yeah, so just talking, I know that you've heard about the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grants, but just to mention again, because these are some of the, I guess, more major grants that might be helpful, capacity and capacity building activities. And this includes project scoping as well, and obviously implementation projects. And then they also can provide some funding for management costs. They do have a cost share of 25%. However, they reduce it to 10% for economically disadvantaged rural communities. And this cost share may consist of cash donated or third-party in-kind services and materials. And there are certain situations that if federal statutory authority allows, that funds from other federal program awards can be used for the cost share. It's typically not the case, but there are definitely specific situations where those can be used. And just a note, as I mentioned earlier, you do need a FEMA approved hazard mitigation plan to apply for implementation funds. I will, yeah, I'll pause there, just see if people have anything they would like to add or share.
This is Twyla. I know this is probably not the platform to express some of the thoughts I have when it comes to this, but one of the biggest barriers Shishmaref has, and probably a lot of other tribal communities, are cost shares and the need for a hazard mitigation plan. As a lot of times we can't even utilize hundreds of thousands of dollars of funds because we're economically disadvantaged. And then the hazard mitigation plan previous to 2018, there was an exception made because there were so many people, rural Alaskan communities, that were on a waiting list. And if you were on a waiting list, you could still apply for funds. But management changed within the realm of FEMA, and communities were no longer able to access any funds. And I don't think still, because they don't have a current hazard mitigation plan. So this is, I don't know, it just magnifies another barrier in my eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Those are hugely important points, because it definitely, yeah, the cost shares are a huge barrier.
Yeah, but having that in there and showing that that's what's needed, a lot of communities don't know that. So having this information there, I suppose, is better than not.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Tyler. Really appreciate what you're saying. Yeah, any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, and just, I guess this is just a heads up on the FEMA BRIC timeline. So for this year, the application period closed in January 27th of 2023. So if, this is an annual program, so the funding opportunity is typically published in the summer, the application opens in the fall, it closes in the winter. Then there's a review period, and then in the spring, they may select projects for further review, and it looks like the final project selections are announced in the summer. Let's see here. And then we also just wanted to mention the hazard mitigation and assistance grants, and this is available after a disaster declaration. And one thing of note is that federally recognized tribal governments, through their tribal chief executive, may also submit a request for a disaster declaration within their impacted areas, and request that this grant funding be made available under that declaration. With COVID, we've been in an unusual situation in that there's been a kind of a nationwide disaster declaration that's covered everyone. And just kind of a heads up that that's scheduled to end on May 11th. So let's see here. Yeah, so we wanted also to point out technical resources that are available. Let's see. So we've kind of got these at the end of the funding and technical resource page. You know, the Department of Transportation has a tribal technical assistance program, you know, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. And so there's a variety of technical assistance programs. We also wanted to let people know about, let me see, there's this new initiative with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Let me see if I can put this in the chat here. So it's these Thriving Communities Network. And so these are the agencies involved in this Thriving Communities Network. And so there are new technical assistance centers that are starting to come up associated with the Thriving Communities. And so on this page, you can kind of get more resources. But one in particular that we thought might be of interest, and we're wondering if anyone has any experience with, is the HUD exchange, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They've got this new Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Program, and it looks like it's a collaboration between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Transportation. And tribes are eligible to receive this technical assistance. And it looks like you kind of click on this form and I'll just show you, and then you can submit a request. So we just wanted to make people aware of this, and we're curious if people have other technical assistance resources that they might like to share, or if you've had, I don't know if anyone's had any experience with the HUD exchange. So I will pause for a moment and just. Yeah, we welcome any. And we can also try and do a little bit more work looking into that. Let me, I'll put this link in case it proves helpful. So, and on that housing note, Megan, I see that you are on the call. Would it be okay to turn over to you to talk about some of the housing grants?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to switch over to my personal laptop. I was having some difficulties, so let me see if I can share my screen here.
Oh, I might, let me see, let me make you a co-host. Okay. Alrighty, I think you should be able to share your screen.
It is not giving me permission. Which is fine. I could put some links in the chat. I'm literally just going over some websites.
Would you mind trying just one more time? Because it says I wonder if you kind of did it right before. No.
It might be something with my computer.
Okay. Yeah, and feel free to let me know if there's anything you'd like me to share on my end. Oh, it's working.
Really? Oh, yay. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm so glad that that wasn't an issue. Okay, so yes, the first resource that I'm going to be talking about is the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. This program offers assistance to communities whose watershed has been impaired by a financial disaster. And with this, you do not have to have a natural disaster declaration by the federal nor the state government. And it was also brought up during the trip to Alaska that it can also be used to move individual homes. So yeah, that's really nice. The process begins after 60 days of that disaster, so you do have to have the request in at that time. And then as far as the cost goes, there are 3 ways that you can obtain this. There's a structural solution, a buyout, and an easement. The easement restores, protects, and maintains your floodplain, while the buyouts, and that's this link right here. I'll put all these links in the chat. But the buyouts are used, let's see here. So yes, also within 60 days. But the buyouts are used when the structural projects to reduce threats from flooding and erosion are not cost effective or beneficial. Any land is available to be bought out. And what this does is it gives them the authority to provide local sponsors with financial assistance to purchase and restore the property. And they may provide the sponsors up to 75% of the fair market value of the land, relocation costs, and site restorations. So yeah, that's this resource right here. Again, I'll put the links in the chat. The next one is the Indian Housing Block Grant Program. So with this one right here, eligible activities are like housing developments, assistant to housing, that is developed underneath the Indian Housing Program, housing services to eligible families and individuals. It helps prevent crime, and also model activities that provide creative approaches to solving affordable housing problems. So with this one right here, there's actually a formula that kind of determines your eligibility. So it's not really straightforward. And that can be found in a place called CFR Part 1000 Subpart D. And what this formula does is all it does is considers your population, income, housing conditions, and a couple other factors. And I can go ahead and also link, that's this right here, this formula. So yeah, I'll go ahead and link that. And so let's see. The next resource here is the Indian Community Development Block Grant. And this grant provides funding for not only housing, but also community facilities and for economic development like commercial, industrial, or agriculture projects. And there are 2 types of grants that you can apply for. The single purpose grant is awarded on a competition basis, while the imminent threat grants are a first come, first serve basis. So it's just a matter of having a sponsor, contacting your sponsor, and going over your specific situation and seeing which fits best. Again, here there's not really any specific details about cost sharing. Unfortunately, I think it is just you have to, inquire about it, about your community specifically. And then the last one that I have here is the Healthy Homes Program. And then this can be used as an incentive to move if there are homeowners that do not want to move. It addresses multiple childhood diseases and injuries and addresses multiple issues at a time rather than just addressing one issue at a time. So some of these hazards, as you can see here, include mold, lead, allergens, asthma, carbon monoxide, pesticides, that sort of thing. And then also cost matching is not required for this one, which is really nice. It is strongly encouraged, although if you do provide a cost share, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to receive extra points when applying. So it is literally just, we recommend it, but no harm if you don't have it. And then there's also not a financial cap on this one. After 10K, the projects do need to be kind of gone over and approved. But with that being said, anything over 10K is still eligible for funding. So that's what's good about this one. And yeah, I will link everything in the chat. And with that, I'll kind of open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions.
And Megan, if it's okay to add, if anyone has suggested resources, that would be great too, if there are particular grant programs that you found to be especially helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll include my email in this message that I'm about to send. And anyone can go ahead and email me if you do think of any questions, we'll get it figured out. And like Karen said, if you have any other resources to add, that would be fantastic.
All right. Thanks so much, Megan. We really appreciate you pointing out those resources. I'm gonna start sharing my screen again. See here. Yeah, unfortunately, Elisa was going to talk about the BIA Branch of Tribal Climate Resilience Annual Awards Program, but she had some unexpected issues come up, so she is not able to join us, but she will be joining us hopefully on Thursday. So if you have time to join again, I think she'll probably be talking about the annual awards program at the start of the call. I just wanted to mention a few other grants and get back. So one thing that people let us know they were interested in was youth engagement. And there are 2 BIA youth engagement opportunities that we wanted to let people know about. There is a way to apply. Let me see if it'll go link to the, oops. If you would like to host a Pathway Interns as a tribe or tribal organization, there is this internship host request form. So that might be a possibility if you would like to engage youth that way. And then also, and this is from the last year's annual awards program, but category 8 are internships. And there was a maximum request amount of 50,000. And then category 9 is specifically for youth engagement, and also had a maximum amount of 50,000. So these might be some ways to, get some funding to engage youth in your RMP process or in other efforts that you are interested in. And I just wanted to check with some of the BIA people and the TCR people on the line and see if there's anything you might like to add or any additional information that you might like to provide.
I'll just offer, this is Coral again. If anybody has any questions about BIA pathways, feel free to reach out to me at any point. If you have questions that I can't answer, I can direct you to the pathways folks directly as well. But I'd be really happy to help facilitate this effort.
Yeah, thanks so much, Coral. We appreciate that.
Hey, Karen, I was just going to add on the annual awards, there'll be a lot more information coming out about this on the 2023 stuff. We're still developing that solicitation. So probably sometime next month, have the RFP out to the tribes, or at least a notice of an upcoming funding opportunity. And applications will likely be accepted through July anyway. So just to give you an idea of the time frame. There'll be plenty of time through most of summer to get application ins for 2023.
Great. That's really helpful, Matt. Thanks so much.
I'll also add one more. Youth opportunity applications have closed for this year, but for 2024, NYCALC, Native Youth
Yes.
Climate Adaptation Leadership Council, is also something to look out for. I don't believe we had applicants from the Northwest this year, surprisingly. So it would be really great to have folks from all regions attending, and that's open to high school students. And I can put a link in the chat for that as well if folks are interested in learning more and bookmarking that for next year.
Yeah, thanks so much for mentioning that, Coral. That is such a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, any other kind of resources or comments on youth engagement?
I'll add one more since we're already on a roll.
Awesome.
There's also the Indian Youth Service Corps, which may be of interest to folks. I don't have a wealth of knowledge on this yet, but it is a developing program and something to start looking into as well for internships and job training opportunities. So I'll go ahead and put a link or two in the chat for that as well.
And wow, I had not heard of that, Coral. Is that a BIA program, or is it?
I believe it's a partnership of several agencies. I know BLM and BIA, to my understanding, are the two leading this effort.
Wow. Okay. Great. Thank you. Wait, this is exciting to hear about these different opportunities. And yeah, any other opportunities people might like to share? All right, going on. So the Inflation Reduction Act grants are starting to come out. And we sent this out in an email, but definitely would like to kind of reiterate. The Indian Collective has a text alert tool for tribes on Inflation Reduction Act opportunities. Let me see if I click on that a little. Oops. So there's a way to, oops, let's see here. Yeah, you can just sign up. It's pretty easy to sign up if that's of interest, and you'll get text alerts as opportunities become available. So that might be a good resource. And these are kind of coming out. We don't have a lot of information yet, but we just wanted to mention these to keep an eye out for these. The US EPA is going to have these environmental and climate justice block grants. And so some of the things that they mentioned that could be funded are mitigating climate and health risks from wildfires, climate resilience and adaptation. And it sounds like there's no cost share, but yeah, we would definitely want to confirm that before saying for sure. And then another one that might be applicable, in particular in our cohort context, are these NOAA's. It looks like they're going to have investing in coastal communities and climate resilience grants. And what they said is that for conservation, restoration, and protection of coastal marine habitats and resources, including fisheries, we know that food security is an issue for a lot of communities. And also says enable coastal communities to prepare for extreme storms and other changing climate conditions. And we're not sure if there will be a cost share, but these are just there are a lot of Inflation Reduction Act grants on the horizon. So this could be a good way to, this text alert tool, if you're interested, could be a good way to keep track of those. And we'll also, obviously we'll let you know about stuff that we hear about, and we'll post it on the website. And I just wanted to pause there in case anyone has any thoughts or comments or suggestions. And Coral, thanks for putting those links in the chat. Let's see. Moving on, another grant that just opened on April 4th that we wanted to let you know is an Indian Collective Self-Determination Grant. So there's this preliminary application period from April 4th to May 3rd. And then if you get invited to submit a full application, that'll happen at the end of May or early June. And then final applications will be due June 28th. These grants are available for up to $100,000 per year with a commitment of 2 years. So you could potentially get a maximum amount of funding of $200,000. These are some of the kinds of projects that can be funded, and it seems flexible, but sustainable food systems, community hunting and fishing, food harvesting and processing, community water initiatives, community preparedness and resiliency initiatives, renewable energy sources, and resilient and regenerative infrastructure improvements or developments, including housing and broadband. So these could be some, maybe some more flexible grant funding, if you will. And I will just pause there and see if any thoughts or comments on maybe if people have had success with foundation grants. We've also heard that the Rasmussen Foundation has funded, for example, purchase of heavy equipment, which can be an issue. So yeah, any kind of foundation grants that people might like to share about? And Caitlin, yeah, thanks so much. Inspiring Girls Expeditions. Yes, that's such an amazing program. So thank you for mentioning that. Would you like to say anything on that, Caitlin? And no pressure to either.
Hey, yeah, sorry, not totally prepared. But Inspiring Girls Expeditions is a really cool program. It's totally free for participants, and they focus on like science as well as art and gaining like outdoor skills and knowledge and confidence in yourself. They here in Alaska, they have 3 different trips, which includes Girls on Ice. So that would be like a glacier trip. How do I say it? A mountaineering expedition, I guess. And then as well as a sea kayaking expedition and a pack rafting day hiking expedition, which would be interior in a forest. And then they also have a program that's in the Pacific Northwest, as well as like in Canada and Switzerland. And it's all expenses paid, but if someone was to participate in like the Alaska trip and they weren't based here in Alaska, I think they'd have to cover their travel. But yeah, really great program. We work with them up here out of UAF actually. So feel free to email me if you have any questions. Applications for that this year are closed, as a lot of summer opportunities are already closed. I think they open up often in January, February, and March. So definitely be on the lookout for next year.
Great. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Yeah, I know some people who've done the Girls on Ice and it just sounds amazing. So I'm
Yeah, I hope I
excited
get to
that you
go with
mentioned-
them someday.
I know, totally.
Oh, and then I also dropped in the chat a link to the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society does an annual national program for youth who can come from, from Alaska, all over anywhere, any tribal nation, and it's all expenses paid. They meet in Colorado, and the goal of this one is to get like real world experience in tribal fish and wildlife management or in environmental management as a whole, as well as like figuring out different career paths and such that you can take to get into the natural resource field. So also
Oh,
a really cool program.
yeah, I missed that. Oh, that sounds awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me a moment here.
So exciting to hear about. Yeah. Yeah, any other programs that people might like to mention before we move on? And we're getting close to the end. All right. Yeah, so another topic that has come up is aquatic habitat restoration. For example, after moving buildings, and we'll kind of go back to the website to show this database resource. We did inquire, we emailed the Bureau of Reclamation. They have two restoration grants that might be of interest. One is the Aquatic Ecosystems Restoration Grants, and then there's also this Environmental Water Resources Grants. But yeah, and Twyla, again, appreciate what you're saying about the cost share. These do have, the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Grant has a 35% cost share, and the Environmental Water Resources Grant has a 25% cost share. And we did ask them if there were, lower cost shares for either for tribal or, low income communities. And they said that there were not. So unfortunately, that is the cost share. Just a few, the Aquatic Ecosystems Restoration Grants cannot be used for coastal restoration, but it can be used for adjacent coastal habitats, such as adjacent river systems and estuaries and marshlands, and also for inland habitats. And then the Environmental Water Resources Grants can be used for coastal and inland habitats. And then I will, let me get out of this, oops. There may be more grants if we go back to there's this nature-based solutions funding database that's linked to our cohort funding page. So this may be a good resource for finding more such grants, but we would also love to hear from you if you have found any habitat restoration. And I'm guessing the National Coastal Resilience Fund also would have some really good aquatic or just habitat restoration. Yeah, open it up for some conversation here.
I wonder if there's, do we have added information on there on how to attain cost shares? I know for Shishmaref, they had sandbags as a last kind of resort, like
Oh,
sandbags like to use,
okay.
because that's minimal as far as cost and efforts for a community to try to utilize. But yeah, I was talking with the Climate Migration Network and in some dialogue, and we had kind of chatted over some of these cost share barriers and things of this nature. And someone suggested that we request from the government agencies to use existing population data and geographic climate risk data in order to create like a formula that would set aside funding automatically for frontline communities and tribes that are critically endangered, like what's happening here in Alaska, because there are between 13 and 20 tribes that are like critically endangered, but a lot of people suffer from things like CPTSD, which is long-term PTSD, and it's
Mhm.
hard to have people in office or occupy certain seats
Right.
because of just the trauma and the inability to sustain somebody in a position of this nature and magnitude, because um,
Mhm.
it's just such a scary situation to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I, in terms of, some of the different grant programs provide examples of cost shares. Let me look at I'm not sure if these particular, I haven't looked super in depth at this, the notice of funding opportunities for these. Yeah, but often it can be like in kind time. And I think the sandbags, that sounds like a great example. I do remember, and maybe someone on the call knows more, that Liza with the Denali Commission also mentioned that sometimes the Denali Commission funds can be used for cost shares. Because there's a way, I don't know, it's like those funds become tribal funds somehow.
Yeah, we utilize
uh,
Denali Commission funds when we were able, but
yeah,
sometimes there just isn't enough designated funds in order to
right.
apply towards a cost share, because the bigger the pocket of funds allotted to a community and
Mhm.
the associated cost share with that, sometimes it's too big to dip into Denali Commission funds.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Really important points that you're making. Yeah. Does anyone on the call have any ideas or thoughts they might like to share on the cost share question? Yeah. And yeah, thanks so much, Tryla. Yeah, I know that this definitely comes up in so many different contexts, and we definitely bring it up with partners as well as a barrier for tribes applying for these grants.
Yeah, maybe we could put it back in their little ballpark too, and
Mhm.
say, some of the things that I'm sharing, like we can't even use the fund sometimes or a lot of times because there aren't any resources for cost share
Right.
ideas or funds to be able to utilize the allotted monies.
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, that sounds good to put it back in there. Cohort too. I guess just one last grant to mention is, and Robert, I'm thinking of this in particular. Again, I'm really excited about the carbon neutral plan that you all put together. There are these I'm guessing you might have heard the climate pollution reduction grants. And they're both planning grants, and then they're also implementation grants. Yeah, with the planning grants, if the plans do require greenhouse gas emissions inventories, but some potential, if you get a planning grant, then you can apply for an implementation grant, and they do fund things like energy efficiency, renewable energy, they're upgrading transportation fleets, and we're actually trying to find out if they would fund in the Jamestown's carbon neutral plan. They had food programs, and we're trying to find out if they would fund things like that. So Yeah, and Kelsey, I don't know if you might have anything to add. Or anyone else based on kind of some of the conversations we've had around the climate pollution reduction control grants. Or I'm saying that wrong, climate pollution reduction grants.
I was just working on that this morning.
Oh, that's okay.
So just was reading up on that grant. It's, as far as I can tell, it's due January 15th for tribes. There was some sort of notice that states and other entities had to submit by April 7th, but as far as I can tell, tribes did not have to do that. There's no match. You might be required to do, depending on what you propose to do, you might be required to write a quality assurance project plan, because that's EPA is kind of big on those. And these grants are not eligible to be put into a PPG if you have a tribal EPA performance partnership grant. But that's about as far as I've gotten so far.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that's great to hear that there is no cost share. That's nice to hear.
Yes.
Great. And then I guess just, yeah, a few last announcements. So we will have another funding calendar call that will be similar to this one. However, we are hoping that Elisa can join and talk about the Tribal Climate Resilience Annual Awards Program grants in a little bit more depth at the start of that call. We also have our just regularly scheduled cohort call on April 19th with a focus on RMP decision making. And then we do have, I think we mentioned on our last call, we will be having some optional project management sessions on April 25th and 26th. And similar to these both will be the same, but just offering it twice so that hopefully people can attend if they are interested. And with that, yeah, any final thoughts or questions? And we're happy to stay on the line too, to have individual conversations as well. All right, if not, thank you. Thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate your time and appreciate all the great conversation. So thank you.